When we look at the world today, one of the most debated topics is women's empowerment. Many believe that feminism is the ultimate path to liberation for women, the key to equality, dignity, and respect. But we must ask, has it truly delivered what it promised? Or has it merely changed the outer structure while leaving the inner imbalance untouched? Islam, when understood with clarity and not through the lens of culture or media, offers something deeper. It doesn't see woman as a competitor to man, but as a complement, two essential halves of one whole. It recognizes her strength not by comparing her to a man, but by honoring her as she is. The modern feminist movement often seeks to make women like men, same roles, same attitudes, same lifestyles. But this imitation leads to exhaustion, not liberation. Islam, on the other hand, celebrates difference. It protects womanhood with dignity and wisdom, not through slogans but through sacred responsibility.
Mm.
It gives women the right to education, ownership, inheritance, consent in marriage, and respect in motherhood, rights granted over 1400 years ago, while the rest of the world was still debating if women even had souls. When a woman steps into the Islamic framework, she is not told to fight men for her space. She is given her own space, sacred and secure. True empowerment is not when a woman imitates man's energy, but when she blossoms in her own. Feminism says, I don't need a man. Islam says, you don't need to fight him. You need to work with him. There is balance, not battle. The problem is not that Islam doesn't empower women. The problem is that many Muslims themselves have forgotten what Islam truly teaches. The remedy is not rebellion, it is revival, returning to the source, not the distortion. In the end, real empowerment doesn't come from loud protests or endless comparisons. It comes from inner peace, from knowing who you are and where your worth truly lies. Islam protects women not by making them like men, but by honoring the divine design within them. In today's world, the word equality is often misunderstood. Many believe that equality means sameness, that a woman must do everything a man does to prove her worth. But this idea is shallow and unnatural. True equality does not mean duplication, it means recognition of unique value. Islam approaches this truth with profound wisdom. It doesn't ask women to abandon their femininity or natural roles to become equal. Instead, it grants them honor and dignity within their own design. Their compassion, emotional depth, and power to nurture life are not weaknesses but divine strengths. When you look at nature, you see that balance exists in difference. The sun and the moon are not the same, yet both are vital. The right hand and the left hand are not identical, yet both serve one body. Similarly, man and woman are not meant to marry each other. They are meant to complete one another. Islam recognizes this harmony and builds its moral and social framework around it. It does not ask women to carry the same physical, financial, or social burden as men, but gives them protection, respect, and their own sacred responsibilities that align with their natural strengths. In contrast, much of modern feminism has turned into a pursuit of imitation. It tells women that to be successful, they must live, work, and behave like men. But this approach often leads to burnout, inner conflict, and loss of identity. When a woman feels she must suppress her dignity is not earned through competition, it is already given by the Creator. Islam's view of equality is rooted in justice, not sameness. It gives women rights tailored to their nature, the right to education, financial independence, and personal consent, while also providing protection where it is due. This is not inequality, it is balance. Just as a mother's role cannot be replaced by a father, a woman's role cannot be defined by a man's standards. When society learns to value both energies equally, not by blending them into one, but by honoring their differences, only then can true equality, the kind that uplifts both, truly exist. In creation, everything exists in pairs, day and night, earth and sky, giving and receiving. These pairs are not in conflict, they function in harmony to maintain the rhythm of life. The same principle applies to man and woman. They are not designed to compete, but to complete one another. Each carries qualities the other lacks, and together they form a perfect balance. Islam beautifully recognizes this divine design. It does not place one above the other, but defines roles and responsibilities that create equilibrium, not hierarchy. This balance is not about dominance or submission, it is about cooperation and mutual respect. When one understands the balance between masculine and feminine energy, it becomes clear that both are necessary for the world to thrive. The masculine energy provides direction, structure, and protection. The feminine energy nurtures, softens, and gives meaning to that structure. Without one, the other becomes incomplete. In Islam, this relationship is not about ownership, but guardianship, A man is not superior because he provides, he is responsible because he is entrusted with care. A woman is not inferior because she nurtures, she is honored because she gives life, both physically and emotionally. When this divine balance is lived with understanding, it creates families rooted in peace, not power struggles. Modern ideology often disrupts this natural harmony by insisting that equality means sameness. It teaches that the only way for women to rise is to take the place of men, and the only way for men to support women is to step aside. But when you remove balance from creation, you invite chaos. A world that forgets its natural order begins to suffer emotionally, spiritually, and socially. Relationships become battles for control rather than expressions of love. Islam protects against this by assigning roles that sustain both harmony and dignity, roles that are different yet equally valuable. In this divine framework, man and woman are not rivals on opposite sides. They are partners walking the same path. Their unity brings spiritual and emotional fulfillment that no external success can replace. When each fulfills their role with sincerity, there is no oppression, only order, no competition, only cooperation. The strength of society lies not in the dominance of one over the other, but in their synchronized movement, like two wings of a bird rising together in balance and grace. When people today speak of women's rights, they often believe that the concept is modern, something born out of the last few centuries through revolutions and activism. But long before the world even acknowledged the worth of a woman, Islam had already granted her rights that were revolutionary for its time. Over 1400 years ago, when women in most parts of the world were treated as property, denied inheritance, and silenced in society, Islam raised her to a position of dignity and independence. It declared that she has her own identity, her own will, and her own share in the wealth she earns or inherits. This was not just a social reform, it was a divine declaration that a woman's value is inherent and sacred. Islamic teachings gave women the right to education when most civilizations thought learning was a man's domain. The Prophet encouraged seeking knowledge as an obligation for both men and women. It gave women the right to inherit from their parents and spouses, to own property, to engage in business, and to keep their earnings without interference. At a time when many cultures viewed marriage as a transaction, Islam made it a sacred covenant requiring the woman's free consent. These laws were not symbolic gestures, they were practical and forcible rights that transformed the structure of society and elevated the spiritual and social standing of women. Contrast this with the historical reality of much of the world. In Europe, women were not allowed to own property until the 19th century. In some societies, they were denied education and legal identity for centuries. Yet, in Islamic civilization, women were scholars, poets, business leaders, and educators, while others were still struggling for recognition. Figures like Khadija bint Khuwailid, a successful businesswoman, and Aisha bint Abi Bakr, a renowned scholar, are not anomalies. They are reflections of what Islam made possible when its teachings were lived sincerely. The empowerment Islam offered was holistic, spiritual, intellectual, and economic. But over time, cultural distortions and ignorance overshadowed these divine rights. Many societies began to confuse local customs with religion, and women once again found themselves restricted, not by Islam, but by the laws of its true understanding. The original message, however, remains unchanged, that a woman is an honored being with rights given by the Creator Himself, not by human law or social approval. When these rights are revived in their true spirit, society rediscovers the timeless justice that Islam introduced centuries before the world even began to speak of equality. In a world that often confuses exposure with freedom, the concept of modesty has become misunderstood. Many assume that modesty is a restriction, a form of control that suppresses a woman's individuality. But in reality, modesty is not about hiding, it is about honoring. It is a declaration that a woman's worth is not measured by how much of herself she shows, but by the depth of her character, her intellect, and her inner light. Islam elevates modesty as a form of strength, not just in clothing, but in behavior, attitude, and presence. It shields a woman's dignity from becoming a commodity in a world that constantly seeks to objectify her. Modesty in Islam is not imposed to diminish a woman. It exists to protect her value from a gaze that sees her body before her soul. It gives her control over how she is perceived and approached. In a culture that teaches women to seek validation through beauty and external appearance, Islam teaches that the most powerful beauty is one that cannot be sold or exploited. When a woman embraces modesty, she is not giving up her freedom. The veil or hijab is often misunderstood as a symbol of oppression, but for many women it is a conscious choice, an act of spiritual independence. It allows them to walk through society with dignity, free from the constant demand to impress, attract, or perform. It reminds the world that their identity is rooted in purpose, not appearance. Islam's approach to modesty does not only protect women, it also disciplines men by teaching them to lower their gaze and respect boundaries. This mutual responsibility creates a social atmosphere where respect replaces exploitation and purity of intention replaces objectification. In essence, modesty empowers women to define themselves on their own terms. It places value where it truly belongs, in wisdom, virtue, and self respect. It protects the inner self from being overshadowed by the outer image. Islam understands that true power does not come from being seen by everyone. It comes from being known deeply by the one who created you. Modesty is not a wall, it is a shield, a form of grace that allows a woman to move through the world with confidence, dignity, and peace. The intention behind feminism began with a noble cause to bring justice and equality to women who had been denied their rightful place in society. Started as a movement to correct imbalance, to give women the voice and freedom they deserved. But over time, the essence of that movement has shifted from seeking harmony to creating rivalry. Instead of building bridges between men and women, it often builds walls. Feminism in its modern form tends to view men as the problem, rather than recognizing that imbalance is the real issue. It encourages women to compete with men to mirror their behavior and to claim power by rejecting their own natural design. What was once a quest for justice has now become, in many cases, a struggle for dominance. This shift has left many women exhausted rather than empowered. Modern feminism tells them that success lies in becoming like men, working endlessly, rejecting family roles, and suppressing their emotions to prove strength. But this approach ignores the fact that men and women are not designed the same way. Each has unique emotional, psychological, and physical patterns that complement one another. When a woman is told that her nurturing, softness, or emotional sensitivity are weaknesses, she begins to lose touch with her natural power. She starts to fight her own nature, and this inner conflict leads to emptiness. Real empowerment does not come from imitating men, but from honoring the divine design that makes women different, yet equally strong. Another misstep of modern feminism is its focus on external change while ignoring inner balance. It seeks to fix social structures without healing the human heart. It demands rights but often forgets responsibilities. It preaches freedom but sometimes ends up enslaving women to materialism, career pressure, and endless social expectations. Instead of freeing them from judgment, it replaces one form of judgment with another. Where a woman who chooses family, faith, or modesty is seen as weak or backward, true liberation cannot be found by breaking rules. It can only be found by understanding the purpose behind them. Islam offers that understanding by aligning empowerment with spiritual peace, not rebellion. The feminist movement, detached from spiritual wisdom, becomes a reaction rather than a resolution. It reacts to oppression but fails to redefine peace. It can change laws, but it cannot heal the soul. Islam, however, it does not need to shout for recognition because it already honors both genders as essential halves of one whole. While feminism fights for equality, Islam nurtures harmony, and in that harmony lies a deeper, lasting form of empowerment that no movement or ideology can replace. In today's modern narrative, the idea of home is often misunderstood. Many view it as a place of confinement for women, a space that limits their freedom or ambitions. But in truth, a home is the foundation of civilization. It is where values are shaped, emotions are nurtured, and the next generation learns how to live with purpose and compassion. Islam recognizes the home not as a cage but as a kingdom, a sacred place where a woman's influence radiates beyond walls and boundaries. Within the home, she is not passive or powerless. She is the heart that keeps life warm and meaningful. A woman's presence gives emotional stability to the household, and through her love and guidance, the moral compass of society is formed. The modern world often glorifies what happens outside the home: careers, fame, achievements, but overlooks the unseen power that shapes minds and souls within it. A mother's patience, wisdom, and faith quietly influence generations more than any public figure ever could. Islam understands this profound truth and honors it. It doesn't restrict a woman to her home, it dignifies her role within it. It tells her that her contribution in raising righteous, intelligent, and compassionate human beings is not lesser than any career or position. It is, in fact, the most important form of leadership. The foundation of every great society is laid by the hands that cradle its children. In many modern movements, the home has been wrongly portrayed as a symbol of weakness, something a woman must escape from to prove her independence. But real independence is not about leaving the home, it is about finding balance between the inner and outer worlds. Islam gives women the right to work, earn, and participate in society, but it never asks them to abandon their family roles in the process. It sees both worlds as extensions of one another. When a woman builds a strong, peaceful home, she builds the emotional stability that allows society itself to function with harmony. The love and balance she nurtures within those walls ripple outward, touching communities and generations. The home, when seen through spiritual vision, is a place of creation, not of bricks and walls, but of hearts and minds. It is where mercy, compassion, and patience take root. A woman's ability to create this atmosphere is not a small task, it is divine artistry. In Islam, this role is not assigned out of limitation, but out of recognition of her natural strength to the strength to nurture, to guide, to heal, and to sustain. The home becomes her canvas, her sanctuary, and her sphere of influence where she shapes the future with tenderness and wisdom. And when the world learns to respect this power, it will rediscover the true meaning of balance, love, and civilization itself. When people witness injustice or imbalance, the first instinct is often rebellion, to reject what seems to be the cause of the problem. Many today look at the mistreatment of women in certain Muslim societies and assume that Islam itself is to blame. But the truth is, the problem lies not in the divine message, but in the human distortion of it. Islam, when practiced as it was revealed, honors and protects women in ways far ahead of its time. What has failed is not the religion, but the people who have drifted away from its true teachings. The answer, therefore, is not rebellion against Islam, but revival, a return to its original wisdom, purity, and balance. Rebellion is often loud and reactive. Revival is quiet but transformative. Rebellion tries to destroy what is wrong. Revival heals what has been forgotten. When we rebel, we fight against something. But when we revive, we awaken something higher within ourselves. The modern approach to women's rights often leans toward rebellion, rejecting faith, redefining morality, and seeking freedom by opposing tradition. But Islam teaches that true change does not come from rejection, it comes from understanding. You cannot fix a broken mirror by smashing it further. You must clean it so it reflects truth again. The revival of Islam's teachings about women means going back to the Quran and the life of the Prophet, where we find countless examples of respect, compassion, and equality. When revival begins, it does not only uplift women, it restores balance to the entire society. A community that honors women as Islam teaches will never oppress them. A man who understands the Prophet's teachings will never harm or silence a woman. He will see her as a partner in faith and destiny. The revival of these values transforms homes, marriages, and societies from within. It brings back the tenderness that rebellion often destroys. When hearts are awakened to divine truth, laws and systems naturally fall into harmony. This is the quiet strength of revival. It does not fight the old with anger, it dissolves it with clarity. Rebellion often demands change from others, while revival begins with oneself. When a woman reconnects with the essence of her faith, she no longer sees herself as a victim of culture, but as a guardian of divine dignity. When a man reconnects with the true teachings, he no longer sees authority as control, but as responsibility. This awakening cannot be achieved through protest or anger. The revival that Islam calls for is not about breaking chains. It is about realizing that those chains were never part of the divine design to begin with. In the noise of today's world, empowerment is often measured by external success, wealth, fame, or influence. But these are fleeting achievements. They satisfy the mind for a while, yet leave the heart restless. Real empowerment begins not in the world outside, but in the world within. It is born from peace, the kind that no position or possession can give. Islam understands this deeply. It teaches that the foundation of true strength is sakina, inner tranquility that comes from knowing your place in the universe and your connection with the Creator. When a woman finds this peace, she no longer needs to chase validation from others because her worth is rooted in something eternal. Her power becomes silent, steady, and unshakable. Modern movements often define empowerment as the freedom to do anything, but freedom without direction becomes confusion. When people pursue empowerment without spiritual grounding, they end up running endlessly after recognition, yet feel more lost than ever. Islam redirects this pursuit inward. It teaches that empowerment is not about proving yourself to the world, it is about mastering yourself. The heart that is content, the mind that is clear, and the soul that is connected to its purpose are far more powerful than any social or political position. Inner peace gives a woman dignity that cannot be stolen because it doesn't depend on anyone's opinion or acceptance. It flows from faith, a trust that her value is already complete, defined by the one who made her. This peace transforms how a woman interacts with the world. When her strength comes from within, she moves with grace, not aggression, with confidence, not comparison. She doesn't need to fight for attention because her presence itself commands respect. Islam teaches that contentment is the richest form of wealth. And when a woman carries this richness within her heart, she becomes unshakable, no matter what society demands of her. Her modesty, patience, and compassion are no longer seen as signs of weakness, but as expressions of deep power. Such a woman influences without controlling, leads without dominating, and inspires without shouting. Her empowerment uplifts others because it comes from a place of inner harmony. In truth, every external battle for equality or respect begins as an internal one. When the soul is restless, the world appears unjust. But when the soul is at peace, everything finds its rightful place. Islam does not tell women to abandon ambition. It tells them to align it with purpose. It calls for strength that grows from serenity and ambition that is guided by humility. This balance between power and peace is what makes empowerment real. A woman connected to her Creator stands tall, not because the world approves, but because her heart is anchored in divine certainty. That is the kind of empowerment that neither time nor circumstance can take away. So, when we truly look beyond the noise of opinions and movements, we find that Islam does not need to compete with modern ideologies to prove its wisdom. It has already given what the world is still searching for. It has given balance where there was confusion, dignity where there was exploitation, and peace where there was rebellion. The beauty of Islam lies in its simplicity. It doesn't shout about women's rights, it lives them through compassion, justice, and divine order. The real empowerment of a woman does not come from becoming louder than the world. It comes from becoming quieter within, so her strength can shine naturally. Islam does not confine her, it refines her. It doesn't restrict her path, it protects her journey. It gives her not only the right to exist freely, but the grace to live meaningfully. The world has tried many systems, yet continues to struggle with balance between men and women, between power and peace. Islam offers that balance, not as a slogan but as a lived reality, a divine harmony that uplifts both. And when we return to its true essence, we don't just find protection for women, we find healing for humanity. In the end, empowerment is not about choosing between man or woman, faith or freedom, tradition or progress. It is about choosing truth over illusion, balance over chaos, and peace over pride. Islam gives that peace. It is not a cage, it is a compass, guiding every soul, man or woman, back to the wholeness that was always meant to be.